Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Have you ever heard that expression that dynamite comes in small packages? Today's guest is a perfect example of that. Her name is Joy Johnson. She is an engineer as well as a graduate of the very, very well-respected and highly esteemed school, the Colorado School of Mines. And she is also an elite athlete in an area that maybe some people might not really consider a sport or athletics. We call it fit pole, pole sport, but some people might refer to it as pole dancing. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the episode. And this is my personal favorite. She is also a martial artist. She trains in something called Krav Maga, which is brutal street fighting. So she is small but mighty. So Joy, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
It is an honor to have you here. And you have an amazing story. Okay, I met you a couple of years ago at the pole when we were taking classes together. And then I kind of drifted away from that studio. And then when I came back to the studio recently, a couple of months ago, you were an instructor. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's wonderful, because Joy is kind of like a level 10 pole dancer is how I refer to you, because you have the most amazing skills and you're a fantastic teacher. But what I would really like you to start with is to tell your story of how you became an engineer. What was it that brought you to that field? Because it's something that more and more women are really getting involved in engineering and in STEM, and I think that's fantastic. So tell us your story.
I fell into engineering fairly accidentally. When I was mid to late teens, I was taking courses at the technical school in our area. And I was actually going there for power sports technology, which is motorcycle maintenance. And while I was there, one of the teachers there encouraged me very out of the blue to go take this what I came to learn was a test in mathematics. At the time, I had been going to school and going to college as well as the technical school, but I was going for criminology. So a drastic shift when I took this test and I passed it, and it turned out to be a competition for placement in a state competition for Skills USA. And at that time, I was doing it because my instructor had encouraged me to, but also because it was like, oh, this is fun. Yeah, I'll do it. Why not? I just entered. So I took this test and I placed into the Skills USA math competition, and then took it all the way to nationals. And I was like third in the country it was applied technical math. So before that, I hadn't been particularly interested. It wasn't really a trajectory I was expecting. But then after learning, hey, I guess I'm good at math, and then trying to pursue that, I got very disillusioned at that same time with the criminal justice field and didn't think that that was really for me as far as a career choice. I'm still interested in the psychology, but I didn't think that it would be a good place for me. So coincidentally at that time, learning that I was interested in math and applied mathematics, and then realizing, hey, criminology is not going to be it. Why not engineering? It was still I was interested in engines, internal combustion. I was already working on motorcycles. And so I thought, well, if I'm not going to do criminology, what if I designed engines? So that was at the point at which I started going to pursue my degree in engineering instead. So yeah, I kind of fell into engineering, and then went to School of Mines, got my degree, and then at the time I was also working full-time. So I had about a decade of work experience when I graduated, which is why I was already working sort of placed in the engineering field so preemptively to get my degree. So that's my story, engineering-wise.
My goodness. Okay, I'm blown away because I did not know any of this. And it amazes me that you didn't even realize that you were this good at math. Was this a surprise to you or?
It was a surprise to me because I knew what math I could do, but I didn't know how it compared to what was normal for people. So I hadn't been particularly, no, I wouldn't say disinterested in math, but I hadn't realized that it was something I excelled at. I thought it was just sort of normal, what I could do daily life, like, make a sandwich. How to do a sandwich compared to other people's is a different story. I knew I could make the sandwich. So only when it was compared and set on the stage, I was like, okay, this is a high level of math that you're doing here. Before that, I hadn't put it in perspective, I guess.
Jeez, that is amazing. I just so instead of making a sandwich, okay, you can make like this gourmet, like 8-course meal.
Yes.
And didn't even realize the effort that most people would have to put into it.
Exactly.
Now, tell me how you got interested in engines. I mean, I'm looking at you and it's like, okay, this is a whole new side of you that I just did not know. So it's blowing my mind. What got you into engines and working with motorcycles? And I got to hear that story.
A couple things. When I got into automotive engines first, I was mostly interested in motorcycles, but my first car was a 92 Geo Prism, and I got it and it didn't function, it didn't work. But I got it for $50 and I needed to drive. So it turned out that it only needed to replace the battery and the alternator. It wasn't a big deal, but at the time, not only did I not have a whole lot of money, but I also was in a place in my life where I wasn't willing to entrust other things to someone else, to just rely on them and say, oh yeah, I take this to the auto shop and they tell me one thing and I have no idea if they're lying, if they're overcharging me, if they're trying to take advantage. So between those two motivations, I started researching and looking into engines and learned how to fix my own car. Fortunately, an old Geo Prism is a really easy car to work on, and it lasted for 550,000 miles, so that was great. But taking an automotive engine down to a smaller scale of motorcycles, not only was I more interested in motorcycles because, how cool is a motorcycle? I wanted to ride them and drive them, be able to work on them. So those two sort of coexisted and culminated into my specific interest in motorcycle engines, which is why I was at the technical college taking an actual course that was not only motorcycles, but ATVs and water, jet skis and snowmobiles and a whole sort of spectrum. So,
okay, so got to hear more about the motorcycles. Number one, do you ride?
I do.
Okay, because I figured you probably did.
Yeah.
But okay, and when did you start riding?
When I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that just really kind of caught my attention was that natural distrust of somebody else telling you what to do, that you take the car in to the auto parts and, okay, yeah, this is what we need to do. And all right, I'll just take your word for it. That natural distrust, which I think is so healthy. And was that something that piqued your interest in criminology?
I've never put those two in relation to each other. I think my interest in criminology was based more on the unpredictable nature that is human nature and how some things are more predictable than we realize. Mm-hmm. So I was more interested in the psychology of criminology. My mother was naturally distrustful of people, and she was very, these days I suppose they call it critical thinking, where she would never assume that somebody was correct just because they were the authority figure on it.
Oh.
Be that at the auto shop or at the grocery store or wherever the case was. So I think I picked up that natural distrust primarily from her, where mm-hmm. somebody would tell her something and she'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go read a book on it and see if we agree.
I love that. I love that. I think that's smart. Mm-hmm. And I think that I love the critical thinking part of it, because I don't trust anybody. I mean, I do have issues with trust. And saying, okay, thank you for telling me that. Now I'm going to research it on my own, and then I'll get back to you and see what I find or what mm-hmm. I decide.
Absolutely. I think there's also an element of believing that you can comprehend in that process. Sometimes I see people assume that somebody is correct in what they're telling them because mm-hmm. they don't want to go through the effort, or they don't believe that they can comprehend. So mm-hmm. Engines are a good example of this, where a lot of people take their car to a shop and trust and assume that they're going to be told the truth because they have no idea what's going on. Mm-hmm. Wherein you could know what's going on if you looked into engines, and anybody could really understand it, but not everyone believes that they can or have the capacity to.
Well, educating yourself is so important in every area of life,
absolutely.
and just not trusting somebody, hey, here's my finances, you just take care of that. Yeah. Or here, I will just, you tell me what to do about my medical care and I'll just trust you because I know you must be right because you're the expert. And just having that natural curiosity, let's call it that instead of mistrust or distrust of people. But that natural curiosity, it's very empowering too, because when you have that kind of knowledge, then when you do take the car into the shop or, yourself to a doctor or, to the grocery store to make sure you're getting the right products, you have that power and it's not that you're at somebody else's mercy.
Absolutely.
So tell us then, how did you get into pole?
Well, I grew up and I was very much a tomboy all through my formative years. Not through any... I was just sort of given free rein, and what I wanted to do was climb trees and dig holes and build forts and work on engines. But after, I guess, early 20s, it was probably when I realized that there was a whole side of me as a woman that I was just not in touch with. And it wasn't because I was sort of pressed into a certain role or a certain concept of femininity, but I just kind of one day realized, I think somebody made a comment about like my waist, and I've got a really small waist and fairly wide hips, so there's a very big hourglass, and I had completely not even realized that was a positive thing. It had completely blown past me. And then I realized that there was this whole side of me that was there and just sitting dormant, and I wanted to get in touch with it. And even if in my like sort of rough and tumble nature, I didn't want to go put on makeup or wear dresses, at least being in touch with that would give me a more complete sense of myself. So I went online, and I'm a very extreme person, so I went online and I looked on Groupon, and I was just scrolling down, I think, the services, and pole dancing came up at the studio where I currently teach. And I was like, that is the most, like, womanly thing I can imagine. And I didn't care about any negative connotations that people hold with pole dancing or pole fitness. It just struck me as like, those are some strong, sexy women, and I want to be like them, or at least learn how. So I signed up, and I went to classes, fell in love. Years passed, now I teach, and it's my favorite thing to do and my favorite place to be.
And you are a fantastic teacher. I have to tell you that, okay? I have studied so many different things, ballet and martial arts and all, Pilates, all these things. And you are really a lovely teacher in so many ways because, number one, you're very encouraging. And I have to confess to the listeners that Joy has had her hands on pretty much every single part of my body because I'm also very fearful, and you're always right there supporting and encouraging and supporting, and physically as well as mentally and emotionally at the same time. But what I love about your teaching style is that you are so analytical about it. So you could tell that you actually integrate your education and experience as an engineer and your love of what you do into teaching pole. So I want you to talk about that and talk about, okay, I can't remember the type of engineering that you specialize in. You're a mechanical...
I'm a mechanical engineer, and I work in vertical transportation. So elevators, escalators, even facade and building envelope applications. Yeah, though those two, they don't integrate in an intuitive way, I would say, but having both the analytical and the creative side, trying to take explanations of like physics and mechanics into dance is actually more complementary than I expected, where I do see the world from sort of a left brain, I guess they would consider mechanical engineering type of perspective, where I think, what's going to hold us up here? Well, it's our momentum and our friction, and what's going to hold us up here? Our knee is going to do this thing, and it's going to prevent us from sliding. So integrating those two it's important to me because I've taken classes where somebody can do something and you watch them and they show you and they can be as nice as can be, but they don't actually explain how it's working. So unless you're able, which I fortunately am, I can kind of get that. I can observe somebody and the mirror neurons, I think, help. But unless you have that sort of knack, then watching somebody else do something isn't going to help you understand how you're going to do it. And even people's perceptions of themselves in their body varies between people. Some have a very in tune sort of instinct where their hands and feet are, and then add upside down to it, and it's all a mess. So I actually appreciate, because it means more to me to hear that you think I'm a good teacher rather than a good dancer, because to me, being able to do a move or do a trick is one thing, but being able to explain it so that somebody else can understand it and to do it themselves, vastly different things, and I'm much more proud of one than the other.
And not everybody is the same.
Yes.
And, we're all built differently. We all have different, the way that we understand movement and the way that we execute movement. And if you just try and mimic what somebody is doing and showing you, that's a really good way to get injured, especially when you're doing something like pole, because it can be a very intense sport, let's say, or art form. You also teach from a theoretic standpoint, because you'll explain things and say, well, theoretically, it's going to go like this, and how does everybody feel about this? And I will always reply, well, theoretically, I understand it, and it makes a lot of sense. But being able to dissect movements and explain them that way, and using the laws of physics and explaining from a physical and even anatomical perspective, but it's not that, deep into anatomy that people just get lost. So
yeah, and I try not to make it specific enough to where different, like you said, different bodies can't comprehend what's going on. Because also, like you said, I say theoretically a lot, because I don't assume, and I feel like some people do, I do not assume that you're supposed to get what I'm teaching just straight out of the gate, first try. And it's unfortunate when people expect that and then are disappointed in themselves if they don't get something at the very first try. Like, we're working towards something. I saw a shirt, I think, that said, progress, not perfection. And that means something to me, because I don't want anyone to feel down on themselves for being unable to do an extremely difficult thing straight out of the gate. So yeah, there's a lot of theories.
Well, and it's almost like baby steps when you're doing some of the things, because a lot of the techniques that we do, and pole is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done some really difficult things. I mean, I danced on point. I still put my point shoes on every now and again. That's not easy. And the martial art that I study and going up through the ranks, I mean, that was not easy. That was really hard. But the hardest thing I have ever done is pole. And it was one of those things that I would get so frustrated and think, oh, why am I even doing this to myself? I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to give up. And then it was like, but if other people can do it, why can't I? And so that's like one of the things that kept me going. But it took me forever just to be able to invert. I mean, it took so long. And I think a lot of the problem was my natural self-preservation and my ballet training. Because, we don't go upside down in ballet. And we don't really do all that flexy things that you have to do to be able to go upside down and, get your butt over your head. It's just not something you do in ballet class.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very unique, aerials in general, pole in specific, is very unique muscle groups, even uses. There's some things that will help build your strength in preparation for it, and again, people rarely do those. It's not a normal thing. It's very cool, but it is not a normal thing to do with your body. Self-preservation specifically, we are going upside down, head towards the floor, hanging off of a steel stick.
What could possibly go wrong?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. But just understanding that and having that sense of just trying and playfulness, which is another thing that I really love about your teaching style, as well as the studio that you teach at and that I take at. And we're going to talk about that studio in a little bit as well. Now I want you to talk about the Krav Maga.
Yes.
How did you get into that?
Well, once again, when I was younger, I was a tomboy, but I was also maybe a little extra violent. I had some really cute cousins, and I was very protective of them, and I was someone who, if I got pushed, I'd push back harder, and then it would just escalate basically infinitely. I'm also very small and very fair, and I look very weak and like somebody who could push me around, and I was not fond of that in any regard. So I'm sure it ties back to my lack of wanting to trust people, but I didn't want to put my safety in anyone else's hands either, or rely on somebody else to look after me. I'm also the oldest daughter of 6, so I had some little siblings that I was very protective of as well. So those together, I got into tussles when I was younger, and eventually, after not after I started pole, but after I moved to Colorado, I looked into some formal training, and specifically I was only interested in the practical aspect of defense. I wasn't particularly interested in making it an art form, although I can appreciate the art forms. I'm just a rough and tumble kind of person. So at the time, I was looking into Krav Maga. It's a Israeli defense system, which is all about pragmatism, practicality, and generally assuming that you are at a disadvantage in a fight, which I typically am. I'm short and small, like I said. So you're assuming that your opponent is bigger, stronger than you, has a weapon, and you don't, assuming that they've got friends. Basically, most worst case scenario. That really resonated with me, and so I was pursuing that. So I took some classes in Krav Maga a couple years, and massive respect for... I think everyone should take at least a component of their own defense into their hands and be responsible for themselves. So having even just a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of information, a little bit of awareness is a positive thing to have and to promote.
Well, again, it's self-empowerment.
Absolutely.
And it's such a confidence,
Absolutely.
Rush, and to know that you could protect yourself and that you're not a victim. And even once you do some of that training, I've only done one class in Krav Maga, and oh my gosh, it was an Epsom salts hot bath soak when I got home. And the two women that were teaching the class, because it was all these women in the class, and one of them says, well, what's the difference between Krav and other martial arts? And one of the women said, it's all martial and no art. And it really is. It is down and dirty and rough and tumble. And you can get some incredible skills from taking even just a few classes.
Absolutely. And like you said, with the confidence boost and empowerment, sometimes in a situation where you would have to defend yourself, being empowered and being confident is enough to put you in a category that takes you out of being a victim, and then a victimizer doesn't even look at you the same. So
Right.
It's preventative as well.
Well, predators are looking for an easy target.
Yep.
And predators come in all sizes, shapes, and forms.
Yep.
And so do attacks. There's not only just physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, there's all kind of attacks. Life is full of hits. And when you have that confidence, you have that training, you are less likely to be a target. All a predator would have to do, or a perpetrator, is look at you and they could just feel the vibe. It's like, nope, not this one.
Yep.
So
wait for someone who's easy, who's distracted, who's weak.
Oh, thank you for saying distracted, because it drives me crazy seeing women walking around with their faces in their phone and not looking around and paying attention to their environment. It makes me crazy. So ladies who are listening, please put down your phones and lift up your head and look around at the environment, see who's watching you, because trust me, they are, and consider taking some self-defense classes. So that's another thing that you teach with your wide variety of multiple skills, is you actually teach self-defense classes.
I do. I've taught several workshops. It's not one of my regular offerings, but it is one of my favorite. It's one of most of the things that I teach, I believe in enough that I teach them for free, but with an extra emphasis on self-defense. It's so valuable and it's so underemphasized, I think. So the more I can spread that, the more I can get people to even just get the first little jolt of belief in themselves, in awareness, in, somebody hits you, you hit them back, you don't curl up. Any little morsel I can spread out there, I'm all about it.
So now I want you to talk a little bit about the studio, because of where you teach, because you also teach private lessons.
I do.
So do you teach private pole, or is it, fitness or pre-pole, or a little bit of everything?
All of the things. Most people come to me for private pole lessons simply because that's what they expect. But I teach everything from how to get your splits, flexibility classes. I would teach self-defense, fitness, flexibility, pole. Some people just do balance or just low pole tricks, all kinds of things. Anything in the realm of fitness, pole dance, pole fitness, martial arts, or at least self-defense. All of it. I'm down. I'm down to help.
Oh, I have to tell you, this is a deep, dark secret, so don't tell anybody, okay? This is just between the two of us right now. But when I did start taking pole, and I was 58 when I started doing it, when I started taking some pole classes, and I figured I'd just do a few classes just for kicks and stuff, and it was actually my martial arts training partner that got me involved in it, so it's a very long story. But once I started continuing with the classes, and of course, I have my martial arts background, And I thought, oh, I had this fantasy that maybe I could go undercover somewhere, and work in one of the clubs and be there, to protect the women and to, just flush out the bad guys and all this. And nobody would expect, but I didn't think that anybody would be looking for a 60-year-old pole dancer. So I just kind of gave up on that dream. But I thought, well, how cool would that be?
That's delightful.
Isn't that delightful? So there always is, if anybody who is working in a club, if you want to learn some really good self-defense techniques so you can have that under your belt or under your booty shorts, whatever, I think that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to talk about the studio, and that is Studio 360. And I have taken classes, probably just 3 different pole studios in town, and there are a lot of pole studios. The thing about 360, it has such a sense of community and support with the dancers and the students and everything. Everybody is very encouraging. It's a little family or a little community. And that's one place where I always felt really comfortable. I had gone to other studios, along the way, and it was like, oh man, I just couldn't get out of there fast enough. But it's just such a warm, small, supportive, I want to even say loving environment, and everybody is welcome. And that's what I really love about it. There's no body shaming. There are women of every size, age, shape, levels. It's just wonderful. So talk a little bit about the studio so we can promote that as well as you if people want to contact you for private lessons.
Absolutely. So like you said, Studio 360, it's spelled all cute. So studio, the number 3, 6 spelled out SIX, and then the letter T. It's off Colorado Boulevard in Denver, and right by Evans and Yale, I guess. Mm-hmm. Colorado Evans or Yale. Jen is the owner. You can contact her or any of us really at info@studio360.com. We're available through the MindBody app, through Google Maps. Mm-hmm. I don't know how kids get their information these days, but I'm sure we're on there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you want to come take a class, I highly recommend it. If you want a private lesson, I'm always down. I'll make it work. So yeah.
And the studio also does offer workshops.
Yes.
Which you just came from attending a workshop.
I sure did.
And you look fabulous.
Well, thank you. Yes, one of our very own instructors, Lauren, taught a how to do makeup workshop from basics to even some more advanced makeup techniques. She teaches pole on Tuesday nights as well. Highly recommended. But yeah, we have all kinds of workshops, and they're not only there's a great variety of them. They change all the time, but they're super fun and super welcoming and all levels accepted. So yeah, I just learned how to make the perfect cat eye. Mine are a little uneven, but I'm sure if I angled my tricky tape.
Well, and if you tilt your head a certain way, they look totally even.
Yeah,
and
just present my good side.
Well, it's beautiful, and you look marvelous.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Joy, do you have any final pearls of wisdom that you want to share with the audience? Because we've got a lot of listeners who are going to be, thinking, maybe I should try pole, or maybe I should try Krav, or maybe I should take a self-defense class, which, again, we all highly recommend. Or, gee, I'm too old to try pole, or I'm too heavy, or, anything.
I think that this might go off tangential, just fair warning. But one of the biggest things that I would encourage your listeners to avoid is judging themselves by someone else's standard. And I've seen that sort of stand in the way of people trying new things, pole specifically, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Trying new things, they tear themselves down preemptively before they've even tried. So I want you all to understand that learning is a good thing, and you learn at your own pace, you learn in your own way, you have your own body, and it is all unique to you. So don't expect to move or learn like somebody else. It's the apples to oranges comparison. You are a unique, lovely creature, and somebody else is a unique, lovely creature. And the two don't compare. So don't tear yourselves down. It's always good to learn and try new things. And it doesn't matter what size or age or shape, or if you've got all your limbs or all your toes, or it doesn't matter. Don't tear yourself down preemptively. Just go try it and accept that you'll learn at your own pace and in your own way.
And it's very important and very valuable and very growing to get out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you, putting on a pair of booty shorts was really getting out of my comfort zone. It was okay because for the first 6 months I was able to just wear a leotard and dance shorts because we weren't doing any of that inversion stuff. So, yeah, and I thought, I will never, ever put on a pull outfit. And surprise, I did.
Absolutely, and we all benefit from that. I went through that same thing where I was like, I didn't own any shorts. What is this? What is this craziness?
Well, it's really funny, too, because I think even when I first met you and we were taking classes together, I don't think you wore the outfits that you're wearing now.
Not at all.
And you look fantastic in them.
And I feel great, and I feel like it doesn't even matter what I look like. I like them, and that's enough.
That's awesome. Well, Joy, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And you've just been a wonderful guest. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my favorite stuff to talk about.
Well, and remember, no body shaming. It's really important to try new things. And you're uniquely beautiful. And please do consider getting out of that comfort zone, maybe taking some pole classes, and definitely get some self-defense training. And that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.